So last night Frederick gave a talk about precious human life, which was I found very beneficial because it's something I've been thinking about, and laying out the causes very well, a really nice way to think about them. And in our meditation on that, the conclusion is we're supposed to be amazed and be determined to make good use of it. And so I focused on that this morning. And it was interesting. Sometimes when we do analytical meditations, I find it easier to start with a conclusion and work my way backwards, because you're trying to generate a feeling. And so what I found beneficial this morning was actually to think about many things that I have that kind of feeling about, and generate that feeling, and then try to use it for this topic. And I hit a little wall there, which was very interesting. So what kind of things do we feel some amazement about, and then have really appreciation of it, and then determined to make good use of it? Well, I've seen this really often when I used to work in physical therapy, and people had like a huge injury. I had to relearn how to walk. They'd always really, you take your health for granted until something happens. It's just so common. And that's why I think we have this expression, youth is wasted on the young. Because we just have this natural tendency to kind of, without thinking about things, it's very easy to take things for granted. And so we don't even notice things. This happens so many times, like somebody would be on crutches for the first time in their life, and they're kind of difficult and a drag, in a way. And then all of a sudden they notice all the people on crutches, and they'd never noticed them before. This happened, I can't even tell you how many times people said this to me. I'm sure probably 50 times people have said this to me over 30 years, Maybe more, I don't know. So I know that's just like not the case, that all of a sudden more people are on crutches. It's just like now we're in this situation, we're kind of more aware of it. You can only tune into so many things of everything that we're taking in, so now you're tuning into that. So I thought about, things that I could tune into to generate this feeling, and I thought actually about the Declaration of Independence, because my parents told me about what happened to all the fellas that wrote that, the price they paid. They paid quite a price with their wealth and their careers and their livelihood and sometimes their life. And so kind of having some appreciation. And I thought about my health. I thought actually a lot about anger. I thought about how in my prior work, I worked really hard with frustration and not to bring it into work, or the people I worked with, or the people I worked for, the clients. And people I worked with always thought I wasn't angry. And the only one who really saw what I was doing was my immediate boss, which I quite appreciated that he got it. He said, yeah, you work really hard on this. But even the other people I worked with, were kind of surprised when I would say anything about this, but it was the case that sometimes I would be frustrated, and I just learned I didn't want to do that. And then I thought about, I think the way I'd been taught to think about this, which is like the situation of and I tried to make this very real. I started with a story, which is think about like someone who's gone to great hardship for you. For instance, like people who don't have much money, parents who don't have much money, and they work so hard to give things to their kids. And oftentimes those kids, because they see how hard their parents are working, will actually quite appreciate that. And that was like kind of a story. So I really tried to think of my parents and people in my life who I felt that way about. And there were people I felt that way about. There was a man in my town who was a barber, and his wife, I think, worked in an office, and I was quite good friends with them when I was in high school. I really liked spending time with this family because they were so loving, and they worked really hard and didn't earn much money, and they just did everything for their kids, and so their kids really appreciated this. So I really, that was the feeling. So now how about our precious human life and all the causes that we've created? Well, it was interesting. What I spent time thinking about was a man I know who's a Dharma practitioner. And one time, I think it was about 6 years ago, we were at retreat, and he told me, this conversation was about 1 minute long, because wasn't much to be said. But he said, he told me basically that he had in his, I don't know if it was in meditation or somewhere along the line, he had memory of his previous life. And I had no reason really to doubt him. And then I thought about this a number of times as I was trying to cultivate within me the concept of previous lives and rebirth and all this and that, which was foreign. And then about 2 years ago, he came to visit us here, and I was really thinking about this. It was right at the end of retreat, and so I asked him about his experience, because we had never talked about it. And it was so interesting. It was just like this, just like what we're trying to do here. He was aware, he said it wasn't that clear, but he was aware of how hard the person in the previous life had worked for him to have the life that he had now. He was quite aware of how much work they had done. And he had from that this sense of, I need to make good use of this. And I was like quite amazed, because I was kind of expecting one of those stories that you hear people talk about, like, oh, I was Cleopatra and I, just some junk that doesn't really do much for your mind, like, except for maybe inflate your ego. But that wasn't what he said at all. He said, I just don't want to sully what this person did. And even when I thought about that, and I thought, okay, I created these causes, that's what the thought was. I created these causes, so now I should appreciate them. And my mind couldn't quite go there either. And it was like, when I said, another person created these causes, then I could do it. And this is this thing, to me, of like, about our grasping at inherent existence. That everything feels so solid and real, like I created these causes. And I just couldn't make that leap, because this personal identity that I hold on to as me and I don't know where that was before I was born, so I kind of couldn't go there, but when I said, this other person did all this work, and I should really appreciate this and use it, actually that got me to the feeling. And so this is, I think, just some ways to think about using these ideas, because we have to bring them into the level of our experience. Experience is our mind. And so if we're going to transform our mind, we have to look at our experience and just really play with it and use it and see what works. And so sometimes starting with the result, making lots of examples, generating the feeling inside of you, and then, just trying to work with it that way. And so we don't just kind of walk around never seeing anybody on crutches, never appreciating what we have.